This was truly hard to record. I thought about many ways that I could record this episode. And the best way for me to say it is that the reason why I'm sharing this episode where I talk about my own generational trauma is that I think our business and our life is really a manifestation of our inner landscape. And until we address those things that are uncomfortable, we'll never be able to rewrite the narrative for ourselves. So, this is an episode that I did on my friend Veronica Romney's Rainmaker podcast. And I thought it was important enough to share with you. And so I hope that through sharing my own struggles and very deeply personal things about my relationship with my mother, that I can encourage you to connect the dots and think about ways where your stories and your identities kept you stuck and how you might be able to break through those barriers so that you can create a new reality for yourself. Thank you for always welcoming me to be my most authentic self and showing up exactly how I am, being the messy, complex individuals that we all are. I'm honored to be on this entrepreneur journey with us. And without further ado, here is the episode.
Okay, Rainmaker family, listen to this. I showed up 30 minutes for the recording of this podcast. That's how excited I am for this recording. It is a conversation, one, I have never had on the podcast. Two, it's actually a conversation I don't have very often, even in my personal or professional circles, because it's a heavy one. So just as a Surgeon General warning, we're going to talk about trauma. We're going to talk about generational trauma. We're going to talk about scarcity. We're going to talk about wounds. We're going to talk about some stuff. And if that is upsetting to you, or you are in a vulnerable position or state currently, presently, that this is maybe not a good idea, by all means, I respectfully ask you to just listen to your gut on this. But if this is something that has also been itching you like it has for me, then buckle up, because I have the perfect guest to have this conversation, who is bringing her most authentic and vulnerable self. And I am so grateful for it. So Miss Gloria Chou, who is like a dream of dreams. We had a chance to work together here and there in the past. We were basically DMing on Instagram, as one does, about where we are today from the last time we spoke, and getting each other up to speed. And then we started getting a little bit deeper, and I invited you to the podcast and you said yes. And so why don't you formally introduce yourself to the audience, and then we'll just dive right in.
Thank you so much, by the way. You got me a little teary eyed with that introduction. My name's Gloria. I live in Brooklyn. I am a daughter of Chinese immigrants, single mother. I'm not a single mother, but my mom was. And I used to be a US diplomat. I abandoned that comfortable career where I had a 25-year career trajectory with a pension and went and basically restarted my life. And during COVID, I built a small business PR program called the PR Starter Pack, from cold calling thousands of newsrooms and cracking the code on how do I get that person to say yes, who might be an editor or who might be a blogger with no PR experience. I've never worked in a PR agency. I've never worked in a marketing agency. And now I'm just sharing what I learned to help all of the other scrappy, bootstrapping, mainly women of color founders so that they can also get seen in the media. I'll tell you my why really quick. More than just PR and growing your business is that we know that Black women start businesses more than any other demographic. We don't see that reflected in the media. We don't see, the stories of BIPOC founders, people who are more diverse. And we cannot rewrite the narrative if we don't do the sacred work of pitching ourselves and our story. So that's really my why and why I do what I do.
So you are a daughter of immigrants. I too am the eldest child and daughter of two Cuban immigrants who literally fled communism. And they're entrepreneurs, right? So they came to this country and started an air conditioning company in South Florida because it's a necessity, and it doesn't require 4 years of formal education and financing they didn't have. And here we are, and I am now the product of that. So this is a conversation that I know is. I was telling this even before we turned on the mic. That this conversation I already know for a fact is going to prompt me to look internally. So why don't you take us to the beginning? How did you? At what point, or was there a moment that the realization of that generational trauma came obnoxiously present in your life? What happened, if you don't mind sharing?
Well, I'll tell you what happened with my business that made me realize maybe I need to slow down a little bit. So, as online entrepreneurs, we're always looking for the next goalpost. 6-figure months, 6-figure launch, seven, whatever it is, right? It's never enough. I think part of it is our internalized capitalism, where the more money we make, the more worthy we are as humans. I was taught that at a young age, where my mother literally said to me when I was deeply unhappy in the State Department when I was a diplomat, she says, "You have a great job. It's okay that you're depressed. Just keep your head down and say yes, sir." Right? They're paying you. So that was kind of her trauma, because when my father passed away, when I was 3, she was a widow at 29 in a new country, far thousands of miles removed from her family. That was her thing, right? That was her thing, that was like, how do I survive? And through her building her own business and rebuilding her life, she knew that financial freedom was the only way she could survive. So she put that onto me, right? So I really believe that too. The more is always better. So I lived my life, my entire life, always through that lens of more is better. And I was never satiated. I was never satisfied. Obviously, on one hand, that's good, right? Because it keeps us going. But I had this massive tumor that grew in my uterus during COVID while I was building my business. So basically, in 20 like last year in 2022, I had a surgery to remove an 11 centimeter fibroid tumor, which is the size of a baby's head, basically. That was growing rapidly in my uterus. I don't know where it came from. And I had to have an open abdominal C-section, basically. Major, major surgery, right? Um, on day 3, I got back on the computer with staples like on my bikini line, wearing bandages. 4 weeks later, I pulled off my first 6-figure launch, and I went into a complete mental meltdown. I had spiraling thoughts. I literally couldn't get up. I had to be horizontal, and every little thing would just send me into like a state of fatigue where I couldn't literally stand up. I was crying in the middle of like just talking to my friends. And I realized that I also had stress blinking, all the other things, but I was experiencing like mental and physical burnout. So I started to look back at, why is it that I'm making more money than I ever thought possible. I finally pulled off a 6-figure launch, but I am deeply unhappy. And so through reading a lot of literature about energies, because I really do believe everything is energy, the womb, your sacral chakra, controls money, and I was operating from a source of scarcity, closing at all costs, right? Not always like realizing, always thinking more is better, not really focused on attracting the right people, but just anyone. And I realized that that tumor that had rapidly grown in my uterus, in my sacral chakra, was literally, quite literally, a symbol of stuck energy. Because I was operating my business from a point of, how much money can I save? And I remember when I was working with you, I was like, I want to hire this one person who can do this, and this, and this, and this, and this. And that's not operating through a form of abundance or trust. That's literally just trying to get the best deal, right? And we have a lot of stereotypes about like Asians wanting the best deal. It's really a generational trauma thing too, because you have a society that went from mainly agrarian and imperialist in one generation. Now they have Teslas and Porsches. So that's a whole like countrywide thing. Um, so that was me. And I started to read a lot of literature about psychosomatic things and how the body literally keeps the score. And so I spent all of last year deconstructing my narrative and relationship with money. It's still a lifelong process. I still revert back to scarcity often. The other day, had a conversation with my husband because we were wedding planning, and he literally sat me down and was like, "Listen, I don't want to go through with this wedding if you're going to keep treating it like a business transaction." Yeah, and he's like, "Our wedding planner said that we lacked a sort of romanticism, and you were treating it like such a business thing." Yep. And we are going to be taken advantage of. We are going to spend more than we want, and you're not going to be able to get the best deal. And that was my scarcity, like creeping back up again, right? So it comes back. It's not like I've solved it, but I have definitely learned the way I approach my business was through a place of scarcity. And I spent all of last year trying to rewrite that, working with an ethical copywriter, Brittany McBean, to take apart my messaging quite literally, because we've all been brainwashed from the funnel bros, right? Like, you can get this and this and this and this and this for $50,000 for $599. Like, no. So I stopped doing all of that. No funnel stalking. I actually started to reveal the price of my program at the beginning of the webinar now instead of the end. And through doing all the work, I'm much closer to leaning into the business that prioritizes my intuition and my health and my own knowing, rather than following someone else's moving stick. That's like, you're never enough and more is
Sure.
better.
Okay, I already know feels are coming, guys. I can already feel some stuff coming up for me. Um, because I had a similar situation happen to me, not in my entrepreneurial journey yet, which there's plenty of those. Trust me, I have the picture of like the newborn in my hands with a laptop at like the kitchen counter. But actually, even when I was in corporate, this happened because I was told that women don't come back from maternity leaves; they become stay-at-home moms, and it was almost like issued as a challenge. And so instead of taking 8 weeks or 12 weeks, I think I came back in 6 weeks after having my first son. And that was really stupid. I'll be very honest with you. And then I also started my business and then had a second baby while still working my full-time corporate job, which again, also extremely stupid. And there was, I think and this is what I want to talk to you about because in some regards, and this is, you can hear me struggling with this literally on camera, right? In some regards, there's some elements of my personality that I love. Like I love the grit and the work ethic that my Cuban parents have instilled in me from like the womb. Like I came out guns a-blazing, like let's go, like bring it on world, you know? And I was told the same thing. You know, my parents told me, you want to change your stars, you want to change your destiny, get it educated, and not just like B's and C's. No, get educated. So like I graduated high school with 64 college credits. I finished college in 3 years, not 4 years. I was working at 20. I graduated high school at 17. Like I've never not overdone it or been an overachiever. And now as a 35-year-old woman, mother, wife, I'm constantly over functioning. So here we are. So like I see patterns. It's not unclear to me. I'm aware of where some of my strengths have turned into sabotage, self-sabotage. And then at the same time, I wrestle with it too because I appreciate those attributes that I possess and that I have been given by my parents. I appreciate my grit, my resourcefulness, my pragmatism, all of those things. And so keeping them in healthy balance or having enough discipline to use them with restraint so that it doesn't overtake me, but it helps me achieve, that's so hard. It's so hard. I don't know if you want to speak to that. Like, teach me what your ways. Where have you come to with that? To have appreciation for what it is while still recognizing it could turn into weakness if not controlled.
I still am very early on my journey. I will say that psychedelics have helped. I hope it's okay to say that. I think we need to normalize the talk around psychedelic assisted therapy and drugs because, it's okay to soothe yourself with alcohol, but it's not. So I've done a lot of work around that. And I just think it's the way that we approach business as women. It's a man's world, the way that capitalism makes us work 40 hours so that all of our time is, spent producing. And also as children of immigrants, of how we are forced to, especially women, women of immigrants, how we always want to put other people's caretaking like as a priority, and somehow like as daughters we're responsible for taking care of other people even before we were born, right? Like you always hear like, oh well, if you have a daughter, like they'll be more caring like, for other people. So it's all of those generational narratives that have been deeply ingrained in us. So this is really hard work. It's not work that I'm going to be able to do fully in my lifetime, but I think that fibroid and my body screaming at me of like, there's a blockage here. There's something that's not communicating, right? Me being completely not connected to my feminine, maybe losing my libido, not being able to fully even experiencing orgasm, which I know is not uncommon for successful women. It all connects. It all makes so much sense, right?
Yeah, no, it does make sense. And yes, 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 and yes. In fact, and I've shared this on social media, and so I have no issues sharing it here. But like this year in particular, I've wanted to prioritize my health and all of the quadrants that is health, mental health, spiritual health, physical health, sexual health. So I'm actually a part of an intimacy mastermind this year, and I'm very excited about it. There's so many things, but it's true. God, we can fixate on, like, to your point, especially as a business owner. And I've talked about this too, where I've struggled in my parenting because in my parenting, it feels like Groundhog Day every day. Like we have the same argument about dinner and the same argument about going to bed on time. But in business, it's this gamification where, okay, you had a 6-figure launch. What about a 7-figure launch? And what about, not just a 6-figure year, but a 7-figure year, an 8-figure year. And it's never enough. It's insatiable. It's never enough. And then when not managed, or again, the restraint, you see, really successful personalities and personal brands on the internet just shut it all down
which we
out of
saw this
nowhere.
week.
We
Yeah.
just saw, yep. I didn't know if you had thoughts on that or not, or you want to speak to
Yeah.
that.
I think that we are coming, I think COVID kind of accelerated that, but I think
Okay.
our toxic, cancerous form of capitalism and scaling has come to a point where it needs to be addressed. And I think with really famous entrepreneurs who have reached all the high highs in, really, really short amount of time, like somehow that's not aligned with our natural physiology, like biology. And but the industry tells you like you're doing great, keep going, it's okay that you're not getting regular periods, or it's okay that all of those things. So obviously for me it's that plus my mother wound. I've only lived with my mom probably for 8 years of my entire life because she had to work, right? She was abroad working, and I had to live with other people. And so it's so deep, and so it was always like, I'm the only one that's going to be able to take care of myself. So I never learned how to truly receive. And when we talk about orgasms and libido and the feminine magic, it's really receiving, being able to receive. And so I think psychedelics has really helped me open that up to be able to receive a little bit more. And I did an incredible psychedelic assisted sound therapy that included intuitive movement, and it completely changed my life. Not the first time I've done psychedelics, but this one was a 7-hour journey with 30 different shamanic instruments, from an expert sound engineer. And it was absolute, like I was crying. There was a couple in the corner in their 60s that were crying. And for the first time in my entire life, I went past forgiveness for my mom, because I thought my whole work was, you have to forgive her, you have to forgive. I felt compassion in my bones, imagining a woman in a new country holding me in her arms as a baby and seeing the dead body of the love of her life. Never felt that way ever. I always rationally thought that I needed to forgive, right? It was like, this makes sense. I need to forgive. But to feel it in my bones, what it's like to have compassion for her, it was the first time in 37 years I've ever felt that. I never felt closeness with her in that way because we're not very close in the sense that we don't talk very much. But yeah, I'm still processing it. It's wild, and I don't want to get teary, but yeah, it has allowed me to receive in a way where I just kind of completely blocked off my compassion for her in my life, and it opened up those channels. And at the same time, which is even more life changing, is for the first time in my life, I had this yearning to become a mother. And Veronica, we're not like besties or anything, although I feel like one day we will. But anyone that knows me knows that I am anti-kid. Like I even told my husband on our first date, I said, I hope you don't want kids because that is an absolute deal breaker for me. Yeah. And so, I'm 37, never wanted to get my eggs frozen, never even thought about it. And so through that journey of healing my mother wound, a new thing opened up, right? And that came flooding in. So this is all very recent, by the way. This is like worldwide exclusive. It's very raw. It just happened like 2 weeks ago. I still haven't told like some of my friends, to be honest. But this is something that I'm like trying to wrestle with, was like this maternal energy that I never had. I just kind of closed my life off to it. I was like, nope, it's not for me. And now it's
Yeah,
coming back because of I was able to
because of the healing,
mm-hmm.
because of the different lens in which you view motherhood,
Yeah.
particularly your own mother.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm curious because I think what I'm in awe of you is this is, you say it and we're saying it, but can't even imagine the depth of the work that has had to have occurred for you to even be on this podcast right now, saying it in the manner in which you're saying it. So let's just say, I'm just going to give a moment of honor and saluting an enormous amount of hard work. Um, Here's the question I want to ask you, because you're so self-aware and you're in it. You're like, I can tell you're just in this process of self-discovery, and you're excited about it in spite of the hard, the labor that it comes with this process. How has this impacted how you've shown up as a leader to your team and to your team members, or to your clients too? But like, how has this exploration, self-discovery, self-awareness changed you as a leader? And that's a big ask because, again, I'm asking you to get on a balcony perspective and to look at you, your present self versus your past self. But I'm just really curious if you've seen patterns or drawn lines in your own growth with how you've shown up as a leader for others.
Yeah, that's really good because a lot of times we tend to think like, oh, my personal issues, like I don't need to solve that business, business, business. But when you are an entrepreneur, it literally is a physical and financial manifestation of all of your childhood scarcities playing out in real life, right? You can hide that a little bit in corporate, but in entrepreneurship, when you are the one making all the decisions, it is truly a reflection of where you are. So I started my business during COVID, um, and I scaled very quickly, right? We were able to, because no one's really doing PR in this way. Like traditionally, we've been told you got to pay some, you know, white dude with the connections and his fancy people. And so the whole like BIPOC and women of color, like all these entrepreneurs were cut off, like they didn't have access. It was like you got to pay or you don't get seen in media. And so that's what we're trying to rewrite. So there's such a need for it and we grew really fast. But as you know, you can only grow as much as you grow your team, right? And if you don't do the work of knowing how to lead with vision and trust instead of scarcity, which comes out in micromanaging, constantly checking, double checking, messaging people at all hours, disempowering people, you're never going to be able to grow your business. I remember when I came to work with you, I was still in the throes of it. I was like, why do I have 5 people working for me? I'm so burnt out and I'm doing all the work. I mean, you knew the answer to that. I just had to walk through that path to myself. It's because I didn't trust. I didn't know how to delegate. I saw it as a very transactional instead of like, how can I onboard this person where in 60 days I might not even see an ROI? And that's what you told me on the call, which was scary for me, right? Because when you see things in a transactional way, you want your return right away. So that has really changed the way I do business and the way that I hire for the long term. So I no longer make decisions of what is the cheapest route, how much can I pile on one person to do everything and squeeze the most out of them, right? Because I did try that and they left and then I was burnt out and I just doing that process and learning the hard way of like, oh, people are leaving. Maybe it's something about me. Definitely has to be about me. Why is it that I have 7 people working for me and I'm doing all the work? It's a reflection of me. So doing all of the work and working with you, I now starting to realize like it actually is way more costly to make a decision from the lens of like what's the cheapest thing because you're actually slowing your growth, right? So now I'm like, who's the best person that I can hire because this is where I want to go. Now, I know this is a privileged thing to say. Not everyone in business, when you're starting out, can afford to hire that. But when you get to a point, because hustle only takes you so far, right? If you get past, 6 figures, you want to get to the 7 figures and have more freedom in your life. Then if you're still operating from that mindset of scarcity of doing everything yourself, you're not going to grow. So literally like an open fist and a closed fist. So the masculine energy is like, take action, solve this thing, do, 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 do. Every time I had a problem, I had a whole action plan on how I was going to solve it. That's a very masculine thing, right? That keeps us going. But I never once took time to like sit and be like, what is this showing me? What is it about me? Otherwise, I'm going to keep perpetuating the pattern, right? So I think that's what the feminine has taught me that I'm so disconnected from is how do I open my fist a little bit more and let things flow, whether it's my money, whether it's maybe hiring someone and not getting the ROI for 60 days, but through that process, I'm going to learn way more about hiring because I'm not going to get it right all the time, right? And so through doing my business through a closed fist, which led to scarcity, hiring people, them leaving, me doing everything on my own anyways, to letting that flow a little bit more, it has really changed the way I do business. I actually had a second 6 figure launch during an economic downturn. And I told my team, I said, I don't even want to do launch numbers. Like, you know how you have like your board of like good, better, best, like you're not like, I don't even care about these numbers anymore. Because like the world is in a weird place. I was like, I just want to show up and serve these people. I want you to know that you're a winner in my book. And we actually surpassed our numbers. So, the universe like shows you in really funny, tricky ways. You just have to listen.
Well, and I would imagine that when you took the emphasis off the financial markers
Mhm.
of what was deemed successful for you and the team, I would imagine that the team also showed up a little bit differently than they have in the past, too, because I can't even imagine the collective
Yeah.
relief. Because I just feel like you're right. It's an interesting time in which we are doing business. It's an industry. It's an interesting industry, this online space, for many reasons. And there's burnout. and workplace trauma
Yeah.
and human collateral all over the place. And so to work with a leader who values my contribution because how it serves people, not how much it pays the person, is radically different than I think how a lot of people are operating when they're so launch dependent. Um, so, anyways, I just want to acknowledge that for you because I can only imagine the collective relief and excitement when the real KPI came out as opposed to the external masculine KPI, which is what we're talking about, which I love. Okay, but I have more questions. And you've been so good. Thank you so much for just being so radically open because, especially in this space, especially in the online space, especially because of how things have run in the past, because of how fruitful marketing techniques like, social media ads have been for a lot of us in the past, where we put a quarter in the slot machine and we get $1 out. So then we look at our people like that. Okay, well, I'm paying you X amount. So I hope that you're giving me at least 10X return because I'm paying you
Yeah.
X amount a month. And not only am I paying you X amount a month, but I started paying you 2 weeks ago. Where's the 10X return from 2 weeks ago? Because I'm already a whole cycle of payments into you. So we're seeing a lot of that attitude towards advertising platforms, I feel like being extended towards human beings who are operating the advertising platforms. And there's not a distinction between the humans versus the machines.
That's
And we're
yeah.
treating the humans like
Yeah, that's
machines.
a brilliant way to put it. It's literally that's literally toxic cancerous capitalism where we are literally units of production, no different than machines.
Yeah. But you hear very successful CEOs pound their, symbolic chest, male and female. I have seen both male and female on stages in this industry talk about how if an employee doesn't, produce 5 to 10X, then they're out. And I mean, they're out fast, which means that they're not only do they have the high expectations, but they're not willing to then, tweak the machine, improve the machine, help them. Like it's, anyways, I have lots, I won't go off on that tangent, but for you, and I do, I remember our power hour. I remember some of the things that came up. And we talked about this. We talked about Frankenstein rolls versus Swiss Army knife. We talked about people who have such beautiful transferable skill that can be used in a variety of fashion, but then also not asking somebody to be a mini version of us just because we're all over the place doesn't mean we expect other people to be all over the place. But talk to me about your big aha that you had between even the distinction between doers versus thinkers versus just even that categorization that maybe you hadn't considered before.
So again, it's the closed fist, open fist, right? When you're operating out of scarcity, you're thinking of how much can I squeeze out of a situation. So naturally, I wanted to hire one person that can do everything: the emails, the ads, the campaigns, the DMs, the selling it, and so, and that's a manifestation of scarcity because you are depriving that person of their ability to operate in their unique zone of genius because we all have one. And if you don't separate that and you say you're going to do all these things, then you're stripping them of how they can really shine, right? And so I started doing a lot of reading about, how to hire people for their zone of genius. And then working with you, you said something that stuck with me forever. And you're like, we need to make a distinction between the thinkers, the strategy people, and the doers. And the quickest way to experience failure with hiring is to force that person to do both. And that stuck with me. And so since our power hour, I started to think, okay, how can I hire an assistant that is happy to do kind of the execution part of it, right? And maybe post the reels and copy and paste the graphics and do the Canva templates. But then the overall marketing person who is doing the strategy, but they're not actually editing the videos and putting on the captions. So that has really helped me in terms of my marketing efforts, where people feel more respected, right? And I have more clarity now as I grow my business to hire that right person. So right now I am looking for a marketing leader. Um, Funny enough, because you're talking about the Rainmaker, which is amazing, by the way. So thinking about that and thinking about how this person can work with my team of video editor, and graphic designer, so that it's not one person doing a Frankenstein role. And I think that will yield, and I'm sure it will yield a very good candidate who is absolutely aligned, because that's what I'm
Mm-hmm.
looking for is alignment.
Well, and you're setting them up for success from the beginning because there's clarity as to what they're doing.
Yeah.
It's and where they're utilizing their gifts as opposed to just being all over the place, because it's like a boat with holes all over the place. Which hole takes priority? I don't know. They're all like we're all sinking like, versus somebody who's like, no, I'm actually commander in chief of the
Mhm.
ship. And I have the authorization to help others or to authorize other people to plug specific holes that are unique to their skills, right?
Yeah.
So anyways, I'm really excited for you, and I appreciate that you sharing that, because I'm, as a provider myself, I'm I'm just being fully vulnerable here. But it's like it's hard for me to be both, like you said, the juxtaposition of both Veronica's, and affectionately I call myself Beyonce when I'm spicy and feisty, and then there's V, who's like everybody's best friend, and all my best friends growing up call me V, right? And so like even in the manner in which I provide services or I help CEOs architect their teams, there's both versions of that constantly. There's these moments where like Beyonce kind of has to just lay it out, right, and be super direct with a CEO who is not nearly as self-aware as you are, right? And then there's these moments where I work with a CEO who is so trauma filled and have had employees burn them and been taken advantage of. I mean, my parents had money embezzled from them. I've had employees
Mm.
walk out on me. I have a lot of empathy, there's no doubt, and there's hurt on both sides always. And so there's that V part of me that's like, come into my bosom. Let me just hold you and like tell you it will be okay. And not all team members will do this to you. Like, I promise you. But to hold both space, to hold space to not just coddle and only affirm, but to say hard things and to invite you to do hard things. And not everyone loves that. I'll be very like, not everyone wants that from a coach, a provider, a consultant, a service provider. And I respect that and I honor that. But I've never deviated from my mission, because I know in order to get the results that you're desperately wanting, we do have to have the conversation of like, hey, hi, it's me. I'm the problem. It's me. Anyways, so I appreciate that you're sharing that, because these are hard things that we've talked about. These are raw things. These are vulnerable things. And you're right. Whether it's my marriage, entrepreneurship, or being a mother, those three elements of my life are constantly in an arm wrestling match of what shows me my inefficiencies the most, like what shows me my lack of the most, because nothing will bring you to your knees in humility, as as does entrepreneurship, parenting, or any kind of relationship. Hello, like there's, as much as I think I know, there's so much more that I don't know, and that reminder is always there in these particular arenas of life. So
I think what you're doing is so sacred. It's really God's work because it's not about selling. Like once you
mhm.
kind of make your money in the online space, like that there's more to have it. But to be able to keep it in a way that doesn't stress you out, to be able to really wake up every day and not chasing the numbers, but to chase a bigger why and have your team do that, that leadership, that is your life's work. It's literally therapy, is what I call it. And if you can really learn more about how to be a leader more than anything, I don't care if it's marketing, it's just like a leader, it will it will pay so many dividends throughout all areas of your life.
Mhm. Do you know how I can tell that I've done good work? Because no matter what kind of CEO that I work with, there's very common things that are said. Like almost every CEO that I've ever known or worked with or been friends with has at one point or another said, "I want to burn my business to the ground." Like this just comes right out. But for me, I can tell when good work has been done and achieved when I work with somebody that goes, I hate managing people. I hate managing people. That's where we start.
Mm.
I hate it. That's literally verbatim what comes out normally. To fast forward whatever length of time and self-awareness and hard work and internal auditing. And now we're at a place where like I'm grateful to be able to help other people to be their best selves. And so I'm grateful for who I have on my team and who is yet to come, because I'm in a position to make their lives better. That's a totally different mental construct of how you view people managing. One is like you said, transactional, masculine, just cogs in a wheel. And then one is like feminine and receiving and this person who is side by side with me is becoming their best selves, and I am the beneficiary of that. And I too, as I become my best self, they get to be the beneficiary of my evolution and my progress. And now we're in this beautiful, family situation, or I wouldn't say family, but just like this really close knit community amongst ourselves as a team, whereas all of us are self improving, all of us stand to benefit from everybody's individual growth. And that's like, you've made it to like nirvana to me when it comes to people managing and leadership and just the best dream team situation possible.
Yeah, I still don't have my dream team. I have to be honest. It's always this thing to strive for, but I think the way I
Mm-hmm.
view it is much more through an internal lens of how can
Mm-hmm.
I be a better leader? Like it's kind of like be to have, right? Be what I
Mm-hmm.
need to be to have that team instead of like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I have the worst luck. I just can't get this right. And these people are so underdependent. It's not like pointing of like the external thing. It's like, what can I work on? Because your
Mm-hmm.
life and your vision and everything you do, your children, right? They're a reflection of
Mm-hmm.
you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's all the other thing too. I mean, people will come and stay, and I did a podcast with the Rainmaker, with Beth and Julia from Geek Pack, and one of the things that Beth said that was like, God, like I still remember it to this moment. She's like, some people stay with you for a season, and some people stay with you for a reason.
Oof.
And I'm like, if you had the summation of teams and team architecting and team building, is that people, are there for you for a season or for a reason. And for you to find meaning in both is where you literally are winning the game of life to me.
Oof.
Just
That's so good. I don't know how I can get better than that, what you just said there.
okay, so I guess what I would like to ask you, because anybody who's listened to this conversation amongst us that either got charged by some of the things that maybe we were talking about, or are in now a greater sense of self-awareness. So like, oh, like shiitake mushroom here. Like, yes, I need to work on some stuff here. And yes, maybe how I was raised or how I was spoken to coming up in my career, or how I'm showing up in my leadership and my team effort. Oh no, like, where do they start? Because you have outlined a lot. You've given a lot of great credit to a lot of you've named your copywriter, you've named books. I mean, like, you give credit where credit is due for all the work that has influenced you and the progress that you made. But my question is, because it can be overwhelming, is where do I even start? Like, should I go buy mushrooms right now? Like, where do I start? Like, where would you advise?
Well, I think the first step is basically just to know that it's a reflection of you. So I'm not saying that there's not people out there to take advantage of you, but more often than not, that's the rarity. And how can you look inside yourself to say there's work to be done? Once you know that there is work to be done, there's the mindset part and the actual like tactical things, right? So things like building a system and processes. And when someone gets hired, make sure that you are hiring them with like great questions. It's not like what can you produce, but like tell me your mindset about this. It starts from the moment that you start to vet. And there's people out there you can hire for hiring projects, right? And then once they are on there, giving them a clear path to what does your first week look like? What does your first 30 days look like? And your first 60 days? And you might not need 60 days outlined, but for me, what I did after my burnout was I realized I had really no systems. And I don't think you're surprised because I think people reach that level when they're like, they got to rebuild the engine. So that's what I did. I use Notion. I started to put a checklist together for every new hire. Like look at how we show up on Instagram. Like listen to some of my podcast episode. Here are some of my values. Like so having a checklist and onboarding where you're not expecting them to do work for you for like the first 2 weeks maybe, and just getting to know the brand, that has really changed the way that I approach work. Whereas before I was like,
Mm,
okay, you're here, bye. And it's like
yeah, dumping and running.
jumping and running. So that is like the tactical thing that you need to do, right? Like the tangible thing, like build systems. Just literally whatever you're doing, turn on a Loom video and
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
explain yourself checking your email, for example, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. I have an appreciation for systems and SOPs, but if you were to ask me if it was my greatest passion, I love doing it, the answer is a hard no.
Yeah.
I'm much more on the marketing side, the art and science of marketing and branding and messaging. However, what I just heard you say, so I think on the surface, what we're saying is systems and Notion and Loom and this and all that, super valid. But what I hear deeper than that, that does require you, to know thyself, is you had to define what success looks like for someone else. And that is very intentional, right? Because how you show up on Instagram or how you would respond in the DMs or how you would do XYZ as the person who's held every position in your business as a gritty startup, I eat what I hunt entrepreneur. You now have to translate that in a way that another person who does not have your skills and background can understand what success looks like for both of us. That is not natural to do that. We just do. We just move. We go forward. And so to pause and go, what are my values? Fine. But more than that, what is in all the little nuances of the business, what do I deem or how would I define success? And then translating that to somebody else is everything. And it requires knowing thyself.
Oof, it's so deep. The way that you have, I know that when the words come out of your mouth, I really feel like you are in your zone of genius because the way you just said that, it's like, you were put on earth to do this type of work. Like you just get it the way you articulate it. So I'm glad you're in your zone of genius because you truly are. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely that as well, but also all the other things. So I talked about the
Mm-hmm.
non-mindset things like the systems and
Mm-hmm.
tools. Now let's talk about mindset because at any given
Please.
moment, an issue or circumstance is always a result of two things, right? It's the mindset and then the actual like resources. Mainly, it's more
Yes.
about mindset. So the mindset is patience, knowing that it's not going to get done to the way that you want to have it done. The
Mm.
Instagram caption is going to have a few words cut off. Maybe my name gets chopped off. Maybe the captions are at a point where it's not showable. Like but through that process, they learn what you like and what you don't like. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Before,
Mm-hmm.
I would just be like literally like waiting for them to post and then like critiquing like this, and this. Then what's the point? Why even hire someone when I'm spending more time to do that? Right. Also, learning to hold my tongue is hard because I
Mm-hmm.
want to comment on every little thing. But when you're constantly drilling on everything, this and this and this, think about how that would make you feel empowered or disempowered, right? Another thing I started to do is I don't really want to message my team like in the off hours. So, there's that button on Slack where you can like schedule, send the message.
Yes,
Please
ma'am.
use that.
All the
Don't
time.
be like old Gloria where I was messaging people at like 11:59 p.m., Nothing's really that urgent. And it's just knowing the same respect that you want your clients to have for
Mm-hmm.
you have for
Mm-hmm.
your team members. And to be
Yeah.
honest, because everything is a reflection of your inner outer world, I had no boundaries. So I was the one that was answering people's customer service at 11:59. And so I expected the same. So doing this work of seeing understanding your value and elevating your humanity, you are able to pass that on to your team members too. But it all starts with you.
The discipline.
Hmm.
And that's not a muscle that is given, that is earned, baby, is the discipline of leadership for sure. And yeah, there's lots of little bells and whistles on your Gmail where you're like, okay, schedule for tomorrow or Monday, and then same thing with Slack all the time, 100%, which is why I love those communication channels for work versus Voxer, because Voxer you don't get that. And so yeah,
Mm.
anyways, solid advice. I completely agree with you on everything that you've just shared. I'm still in awe of your vulnerability, and thank you for sharing everything that you have on this podcast. It's meant a lot, and I genuinely know in my knowing that somebody listening to this needed to hear what you had to say today, and that's a big deal. So thank you, Gloria. Tell the good people where they can, one, connect with you and tell you how much they loved this podcast, but two, also where they can learn more about how you do PR differently than most, because I think that's really important.
Yeah.
And if you are a woman of color, if you are somebody who has a story that needs to be told in a different way that's authentic to you, like they need to talk to you
Oh.
ASAP. So how do they do that?
So you can find me on all the social media, mainly on Instagram at Gloria Chou PR. It's spelled CHOU. If you want to watch my on-demand PR Secrets Masterclass, I have people watching it and they just land like all these big features without even ever talking to me. So I walk through my framework, my CPR pitching method, what a pitch looks like from start to finish. That actually got someone featured in like all the magazines. You can watch it on demand now at gloriachoupr.com/masterclass. And I also have my own podcast, Small Business PR. It's the only small business PR podcast where I actually interview journalists who maybe curate the beauty section for Allure or who make gift guides or who do entrepreneur features at Business Insider. I ask them, what are you looking for? How do you pitch? How can a founder who has never pitched before get featured in their dream outlet? Those are the questions that we tackle. So those are all the things.